Over the last decade or so for Arizona football, things have been pretty below average. Yes, you've had a couple of big moments and big players with guys such as quarterback Khalil Tate, linebacker Scooby Wright, and running back Kadeem Carey, but for the most part, Arizona football has not been at the top of the Pac-12, has not had many exciting seasons, and they've been pretty underwhelming. Except, not anymore. The Wildcats are now one of the hottest teams in college football, have made the college football playoff rankings for the first time since 2017, and both have an exciting coach and players. The sky is the limit seemingly for the Wildcats moving forward, and in today's video, I want to talk about how all this happened. I want to talk about how Arizona went from one of the worst Power 5 programs in college football to now a program that is on the rise and a team that could be a force in the next few years in the Big 12. But before we get started, if you're a big college football fan, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I could cover next. Now let's get started and talk about the impossible rise of Arizona football. Unfortunately, for the most part, Arizona football has not been a historic program. They have had their moments, but all in all, they have been well below average. The end of the Larry Smith era was solid, and the Dick Tomey era was tremendous, but ever since the 2000s have started, Arizona has not been super consistent and has not been able to get over the hump. For example, in 2001, they hired John Mackovic, and he went 5-6, 4-8, and 2-10. He only won a total of 4 conference games in 3 years, and that entire era was a complete disaster. After that, in 2004, the Wildcats would go out and hire Mike Stoops. There are seemingly a couple of Stoops who have been successful in college football, and for the most part, he was an above-average coach. They went 3-8 his first 2 years on campus, but after that, he made bowl games in 4 of 6 seasons. They went 6-6 in 2006, won the Las Vegas Bowl with an 8-5 record in 2008, and then went 8-5 with a loss in the Holiday Bowl and 7-6 with a loss in the Alamo Bowl. After that, Stoops went 4-8 in 2011, and Arizona felt it was time to move on from him. Who did they hire next? Well, they went out and got Rich Rodriguez. Rich Rodriguez had flown up the coaching ladder at West Virginia, and after taking the Michigan job, was expected to be the next big thing. Unfortunately, he would not work out for the Wolverines, so now he would head over to the Pac-12 and try to rebuild his career at Arizona. How did he do at Arizona? Well, he really wasn't that bad. In 2012, they went 8-5 and ended up winning the New Mexico Bowl. In 2013, they went 8-5 once again and won the Advocare Bowl. He had a tremendous start to his tenure, and in 2014, he actually had a really good season. The Wildcats ended up going 10-4, where they eventually lost in the Fiesta Bowl. They got as high as number 17 in the country, and it looked like Arizona was now becoming a solid winner under Rich. Except sadly from there, they would start to go downhill. In 2015, they went 6-6 in the regular season with a win in the New Mexico Bowl, and then in 2016, they went 3-9 with a 1-8 mark in the conference. The Wildcats ended up going 7-6 and lost to Purdue in the Foster Farms Bowl, but there was one major bright spot on the team. It was a quarterback by the name of Khalil Tate. He was an absolutely electrifying player, and many thought that if he could continue to be developed, he could be a dark horse Heisman candidate and a guy who could lead Arizona back to Pac-12 prominence. Unfortunately for Rich, he'd never get an opportunity to coach Khalil again, as he was now gone from the program. The reason he was outed at Arizona was because of a scandal that apparently went on behind the scenes, and you can do the research for yourself if you want to find out, but it was not a good look, so Rich Rodriguez was told to pack his bags. All in all, he saw a lot of success there. In total, his record was 43-35. He took the Wildcats to 5 bowl games and helped turn around a program that had been struggling. Before Rich's arrival, Arizona had only reached 3 bowl games in the last 13 years, and he took them to 5, at times had them near the top of the polls, and even had a tremendous 6-2 start in 2017. But with the scandal going on, his poor finish to 2017, and in general his downward trend there, it was time for them to move on. And Arizona would really have to nail their next hire if they wanted to continue to build a solid football program there. Who would they go out and get? Well, they made an interesting choice. The Wildcats' approach to their next hire was similar to that of Rich Rodriguez. They went after a guy who was really good at his first school and then fell off a little bit at a higher stage. That guy was Kevin Sumlin. Going back in time, Sumlin played at Purdue and went into coaching in 1989 as a graduate assistant at Washington State. From there, he quickly flew up the coaching ladder, becoming the associate head coach at Texas A&M in 2001, and eventually the co-offensive coordinator at Oklahoma from 2006 to 2007. From there, he got the Houston job, where he went 35-17 in 4 years, including 2 10-plus win seasons. He had Houston football relevant, which is why he took the Texas A&M job. In year 1 with the Aggies, he had a couple of superstars, which included Mike Evans, Luke Jokel, and of course Johnny Manziel. Because of those star players, Sumlin was able to lead the Aggies to 11-2 record with a 6-2 mark in the SEC, and they'd eventually win the Cotton Bowl and finish as high as number 5 in the country. This was the peak of Kevin Sumlin's career, as after that, things just never really worked out. Year 2 of Johnny Football was a little bit of a disappointment, as they ended up going 9-4 and beat Duke in the Chick-fil-A Bowl. But after that, Sumlin just could not get over the hump. He went 8-5 every year between 2014 and 2016, and then eventually went 7-5 in 2017. Well, obviously those are not bad records. Sumlin set himself a very high bar, and he was not living up to it. He had a ton of tremendous quarterback talent during that time too, and couldn't really get anything going. Kenny Hill, Kyler Murray, and Kyle Allen all never really developed there, and all three of them ended up leaving. He also famously had Cliff Kingsbury under him for a little while, but all in all, his time at Texas A&M, he went 51-26. But Arizona knew there was potential in Sumlin. He was probably going to get them to a bowl game every year, and had potential to bring the Wildcats to the top of the conference. They hired him in 2018, and working alongside Khalil Tate, many were super optimistic for the 2018 season. Pretty quickly early on, we found out that Kevin Sumlin was not going to make it at Arizona. He lost a close game to BYU in Week 1, and then got destroyed on the road against his former school Houston in Week 2. These two performances were embarrassing, and from there they faced an uphill battle trying to get back. For the rest of the year, they did beat Southern Utah, Oregon State, Cal, Colorado, and number 19 Oregon, but other than that, they really couldn't get a whole lot going. They got blown out on multiple occasions, lost the Territorial Cup, and went 5-7. It was an absolute disaster. Going into 2019, both Kate and star running back J.J. Taylor were back, but both regressed again. They were picked to finish 5th in their division, and in Week 1 they lost on the road to Hawaii. This was really bad. They were off to a bad start again, but then Sumlin had the best stretch of his entire Arizona tenure. They beat Northern Arizona, took care of Texas Tech, beat UCLA, and then won at Colorado. They're now 4-1 and could have easily been 5-0, but then he'd go into a downward spiral, and this would be the beginning of the end. They lost to Washington, lost at USC, lost at Stanford, lost to Oregon State, lost to Oregon, lost to Utah, and then lost the Territorial Cup again. They would finish the year with 7 straight losses, and after starting out 4-1, they went 4-8. For some unknown reason, going into 2020, there was some hype around them. They were picked to finish 1st in the Pac-12 South, and they returned their star running back Gary Brightwell and an up-and-coming receiver by the name of Stanley Berryhill. At the time, Will Plummer was the starting quarterback to begin, but later on, their former big-time recruit Grant Gunnell would take over. Gunnell was better than Plummer, but 2020 did not go as planned. Their first game against Utah was canceled, and from there they lost 5 straight games. They lost by 4 to USC, got blown out by Washington, blown out by UCLA, blown out by Colorado, and then they lost 70-7 against Arizona State. This was arguably the worst loss in school history, and it came at the hands of their arch rival. This was it. Arizona football fans were fed up, and the administration said it's time to move on. Sumlin had now lost 12 straight games. For a guy who was supposed to turn the program around, he really sent Arizona football into a complete downward spiral and made a complete mess of everything. Not only were the odds going to be stacked against the next head coach, but the fan base was bitter and was going to want immediate results. Most were expecting Arizona to hire a flashy name, but that is not exactly what they got, and the fans were not too happy with the new direction of the program. So who would the Wildcats hire? Well, they hired a guy who didn't have a ton of buzz, but was secretly a genius hire. His name was Jedd Fisch. At the time, he was the New England Patriots quarterback coach, but he had spent plenty of other time around college football, and we'll talk about his rise a little bit more in a minute. When he was welcomed to Arizona, the Board of Regents said this, quote, "To have Jedd Fisch come to Tucson to reinvigorate our football program and lead us to championships. Jedd has a unique ability to teach the game of football effectively to his players and to inspire them with his passion. We conducted a national search with an impressive array of candidates, but in the end, Jedd is exactly what our program needs right now, and I cannot wait to partner with him to move us forward." At the time, the other head coaching candidates that Arizona was considering was San Jose State head coach Brent Brennan and Arizona State co-defensive coordinator Antonio Pierce, who is now the head coach of the Raiders. So what did most people think of this hire? Well, before you can accurately judge Jedd Fisch, you need to know his backstory. Going back in time, Fisch was not your average coach, as he did not play football at the high school or collegiate level. In fact, he was actually a tennis player, but eventually he went to the University of Florida and got a degree in criminology. But behind the scenes, his plan was to become a coach. He wanted to someday work for Steve Spurrier, and eventually became a graduate assistant for the Gators between 1999 and 2000. After that, he went straight into the NFL, as he was hired by the Houston Texans as a defensive quality coach, and then from there, he went to the Baltimore Ravens, became the receivers coach for the Broncos, and then eventually the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach for the Minnesota Golden Gophers. He was quickly going up the coaching ladder, and then he took a job at the Seahawks in 2010. He coached quarterbacks there before he'd get his biggest break yet and become the offensive coordinator for the Miami Hurricanes. He was there for 2 seasons before he became the offensive coordinator for the Jacksonville Jaguars. The guy truly was on pretty much every team, and he was a hidden talent, so Jim Harbaugh decided to hire him to his staff, and he became the quarterback and receivers coach for the Wolverines from 2015 to 2016. After that, he went over to UCLA, where he'd coach up Josh Rosen, and then when Jim Mora was no longer the head coach, he was made the interim head coach for the Bruins. So technically, when they hired Fisch, he had been a head coach before, but it was for a very short and brief period. After that, he became an offensive assistant for the Los Angeles Rams and worked closely under Sean McVay. He was there until the end of 2019, before he'd take the quarterback coaching job under Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots. The guy literally was everywhere. You can't make up how many good coaches and how many places this guy has coached at, but that is why Arizona decided to hire him. He was good with quarterbacks, had experience at both the collegiate and NFL level, and had seen a lot. What was the national perception of the hire? Well, let's take a look at that. For the most part, most national analysts thought it was a solid hire, not near the top, but not near the bottom either. I remember I made a video about it and I was cautiously optimistic, but skeptical because he had no prior head coaching experience. Arizona fans, though, were not too happy. For example, apparently there were hundreds of Wildcat fans that posted on social media, and it was pretty much all outrage and disgust. The local newspaper received dozens of emails of fans complaining about the decision, and many thought he was a used car salesman, didn't think he was ready for the job, and thought that the university's president only hired him because they were buddies back in the day. For example, one guy said, quote, "I think the president should run the university and shouldn't be hiring football coaches. It just feels like the athletic director had nothing to say in this, and from where I sit in Houston, it feels like they were told to hire this guy." Well, thankfully, the president didn't listen to this rando, as while Jedd Fisch may have been the most scrutinized coach by his own fan base in college football, he's now turned the Wildcats program around, but before it could get good, it had to get worse. One of the first things that Coach Fisch did was overhaul the roster. Arizona saw 16 players leave the program for the transfer portal, and he quickly brought in 15 transfers to replace them. Will Plummer would take over as the quarterback for them, Northwestern transfer Jake Anderson would become the main back, and Stanley Berryhill would become the main receiver. The Wildcats were picked to finish dead last, and I mean it was for good reason. In their first game against BYU, they lose by 8 points, showing that they could at least be competitive. After that, though, the losses really started to pile up. They got blown out by San Diego State, lost a horrible FCS game at home to Northern Arizona, and then got blown out by Oregon. By the end of September, they were 0-4. It did not get any better in the month of October. They got blown out by UCLA, got shut out by Colorado, lost a close one to Washington, and then lost a close one to USC. There was a little bit of progress being made, but at this time the Cats were 0-8. They got their first win of the Jedd Fisch era in November as they beat Cal 10-3. And Arizona would not be able to capitalize on any momentum, losing their final 3 games to Utah, Wazoo, and ASU. The first season for Arizona saw them go 1-11 with a 1-8 finish in the Pac-12. This was absolutely horrible, and the fan base did not feel any better about the hire than they did a year earlier. In 2022, they were really going to need to see some progress, or the fan base was really going to get upset. Luckily, Jedd Fisch knew exactly what he was doing on the recruiting trail, as he pulled in a plethora of big-time recruits. He landed 4-star receiver Tedero McMillan, 4-star running back Rayshawn Luke, 4-star athlete Keon Burnett, 4-star safety Ephesians Prysock, 4-star linebacker Sterling Lane, and 4-star receiver Kevin Green. That class also featured Noah Fafita, and they brought in multiple transfers who came in and played right away. That included Jayden de Laura from Washington State and Jacob Cowing from UTEP. In 2022, we saw the emergence of Jayden de Laura, 3,685 yards with 25 touchdowns. While he did struggle with interceptions, he was quickly becoming one of the better quarterbacks in the conference. At running back, they had Michael Wiley, and then at receiver, they had a 3-headed monster in Dorian Singer, Jacob Cowing, and Tedero McMillan. The Cats were predicted to finish 11th in the Pac-12, but luckily they made some progress. In Week 1, they went on the road and beat San Diego State 38-20, and this was huge for their momentum. Sadly, in Week 2, they got beat by Mississippi State, before they'd have a surprisingly big victory over North Dakota State. They won by 3 points, and they beat the best FCS team in America. After that, they had a major setback and went on the road and lost to Cal before they beat Colorado. The team was 3-2 in their first 5 games and showing substantial progress, except now they had to go through losing again. They got blown out by Oregon, lost to Washington, lost to USC, and got blown out by Utah. They ultimately played the top 4 teams in the Pac-12 last year, and of course they were going to lose those games, but now being 3-6, they would need to win out to make a bowl game. They started out in the right direction with a win on the road against number 12 UCLA, and this showed that Fisch really was a good coach. After that, unfortunately, they dropped a game to Wazoo at home, officially eliminating themselves from bowl eligibility, but they would beat Arizona State 38-35 in the final game, getting them to a 5-7 record, a win over a rival, and showing that Arizona was moving in the right direction. Fisch's 2023 class was not anything to write home about, but it did include 2 4-star recruits, including Brady Dorman, the number 23 quarterback in the country, who will likely be the future at some point. They also did some work in the transfer portal, bringing in former 5-star recruit Justin Flo, Colorado transfer Montana Lamonius Craig, and former 4-star high school defensive lineman Tyler Manoa. Unfortunately, the Cats did lose their top receiver Dorian Singer to USC, but other than that, they returned pretty much everyone. The 2022 class was starting to see the field more, and there was some growing optimism around the Arizona program. But before we talk about their rise in 2023, we need to meet some of the players that have made this possible. Let's first start with the quarterbacks Jayden de Laura and Noah Fifita. Both of these quarterbacks are extremely important in the rise of Arizona football, and starting with Jayden de Laura, he's always been a winner. Coming out of Hawaii, he was the 2019 Hawaii Gatorade Player of the Year as he threw for 3,452 yards with 29 touchdowns. He went 23-0 his junior and senior year and was a 3-star recruit and committed to play for Washington State. He went up to play with Nick Rolovic and was eventually named the Pac-12 Offensive Freshman of the Year. He decided to transfer to Arizona, where he started all 12 games last season and threw for 3,685 yards and passed for 25 touchdowns. Both those numbers were top 25 in the country and top 6 in Arizona single-season history. Unfortunately, he's been dealing with some off-the-field issues, and some were wondering if he'd even play in 2023, but he did suit up for the first 4 games, throwing for over 1,000 yards with 12 combined touchdowns and 5 picks. Unfortunately, he'd have an ankle injury and has since been on the sidelines because the backup quarterback has done so tremendous. His name is Noah Fifita. He was part of that incredibly important 2022 class, and back at Servite High School in California, he played alongside the receiver Tetero McMillan, and in total there had 7,273 yards with 83 touchdowns. He holds multiple high school records there, and according to 24/7 Sports, was a 3-star recruit and the number 40 quarterback in the class of 2022. Fifita was just a backup in 2022, but would have to play after de Laura got hurt. In his first game against Washington, he threw for 232 yards and 3 touchdowns, and then put on a show against USC. He had an incredible first half, and they were up big on the Trojans, and in the process, he had over 300 yards and 5 touchdowns. Unfortunately, they lost to USC. He has since taken over as a starter and done wonders. Those 2 guys have been extremely important, but the players they've been throwing the ball have also made a huge impact. The first guy I want to talk about is Tetero McMillan. Coming out of Hawaii, he eventually moved to the mainland and went to Servite High School in California alongside Fifita. In 3 years, he caught 179 passes for 2,640 yards and 34 touchdowns. He ended up becoming the Polynesian High School Football Player of the Year and was a 4-star recruit. He ended up flipping to Arizona, and this was a huge get for them. He immediately made an impact in 2022, finishing with 39 catches for 702 yards and 8 touchdowns. This year, he's already had a better season, catching 52 passes for 753 yards and 7 touchdowns, and he'll still have 4 more games to play in. The last super important player we need to talk about is Jacob Cowan. Right now, he's one of the top NFL draft prospects at the receiver spot, but this is not exactly what was supposed to happen. At Maricopa High School in Arizona, he ended up finishing his career with 89 catches for 2,000 yards and 21 touchdowns. He was not a highly recruited player coming out of high school, so he originally signed with UTEP. In his first year, he broke out as a freshman, catching 31 passes for 550 yards and 3 touchdowns, and then put up similar numbers in 2020. In 2021, he had a historic season for the Miners, catching 69 passes for 1,354 yards and 7 touchdowns. Because of this, he was one of the top transfer receivers in the country and decided to go to Arizona. This was a huge win, and immediately he broke out into a star last year. He finished with 85 catches for over 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns, and is on pace to have a similar amount of catches and yards, but even more touchdowns. De Laura, Fifita, Cowing, and McMillan have been extremely important to them, and guided by Jedd Fisch and some positive momentum, Arizona's had a breakout 2023 season. So how have they done it, and what has happened? So going into the season, Arizona was picked to finish 8th in the Pac-12, which was pretty solid compared to a year ago, but was not really supposed to compete with those top 7, who were all supposed to be pretty much sort of elite. In week 1, they'd end up playing against Northern Arizona, where they would get revenge for last year's game, winning 38-3. In week 2, they'd travel to Starkville to play against Mississippi State, and this game was both thrilling and controversial. It ended up going to overtime, and after a Mississippi State score, Jayden de Laura took the ball on 4th down and absolutely had to get the first down to continue the game. He dove and gave it everything he got, and while initially he was given the first down on the field, after review they determined that he didn't get it. In my opinion, this was a controversial call, as I didn't think there was enough evidence to overturn it, and at minimum, it was a really terrible way of ending that game. The call should have stood on the field, and because of that, Arizona lost. This must have fueled them, as in their next 2 games they beat UTEP and Stanford, getting off to a 3-1 record. There was really no expectation at this point, and with Delora going down with an ankle injury, it looked like Arizona's season was going to go down the drain. Against number 7 Washington, Fafita had a huge night, and while he went toe-to-toe with Michael Penix, the number 7 Huskies won 31-24. They were now 3-2. After that, they go on the road to play against number 9 USC, and they were over 20-point underdogs. They did not care, as they got out to a huge lead. Noah Fafita was balling out, and USC was in complete shambles. Unfortunately, Arizona could not hold the momentum, and they ended up blowing it and then lost in 3 overtimes. The Wildcats were now 3-3, but ever since then, they have caught fire. From there, they went on the road to play against number 19 Washington State, and in that game, they absolutely destroyed the Cougars, winning 44-6 and shutting Cam Ward down. This was a huge monumental win, and they would continue forward. After that, they'd host number 11 Oregon State, and the Beavers have been on fire and tough to beat lately. That didn't matter to Arizona, as in this game, they knocked off the number 11 Beavers and won 27-24. This was now their 2nd straight ranked win. Then, this past weekend, they'd once again host a ranked team as number 19 UCLA came to town, and in this game, Arizona dominated from start to finish, winning 27-10. In their stretch of 5 straight ranked teams, they had a legitimate chance to beat all 5 of them, and they won their last 3. After the UCLA game, Coach Fisch said, quote, "6 wins is a big deal, and for us to get there 9 games into the season, we're really excited about that." They're ranked in the AP poll for the first time in a long time, and then on Tuesday night, when the college football playoff rankings dropped, they were put at number 21, and this was the first time since 2017. So far this year, the Wildcats are one of 3 teams in the FBS to beat 3 ranked teams this season, with the other 2 being Alabama and Texas. Arizona is also one of 3 teams in the Pac-12 to face 5 ranked opponents this season. They've won 3 straight games for the first time since 2019, and with these 3 wins against top 25 teams in consecutive games, it had never been done in program history. What did Coach Fisch say? Well, he said, quote, "This was a long process and hard work, an unbelievable amount of commitment from our coaches and players. Our coaches and staff we hired knew were coming here to rebuild the program, and we didn't hire them in a spot where they felt like they were just going to walk in the door and we were going to go win. It takes a lot of people who want to do that and leave their jobs to do that. A lot of these guys we hired were in winning programs when we hired them, and they trusted us along the way and recruited a bunch of good players when we were 1-11. This is a monumental moment for Arizona football, and you can trace all this momentum back to that USC game. Despite being underdogs, the team believed they could win, they found confidence in themselves, and now since then, they have been on fire. That 2022 class was unbelievably important to them, and hopefully they're going to lead Arizona to their first 9-win season in almost a decade. To finish the year, they play at Colorado, home against Utah, and at Arizona State, and with the way they're playing right now, I'd expect them to win all 3. Colorado's fallen off, Utah has sort of hit a stalemate, and Arizona State's terrible. That being said, if I had to put money on it, I'm going to say they're going to lose one of those games and finish the year at 8-4. But either way, they should go to a decent bowl game, and Jedd Fisch is really starting to build something in Arizona. He seemingly knows what he's doing at the quarterback position, has gotten his coaches and players to buy in, and now Arizona football is on the rise. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and if you did, be sure to let me know your thoughts down below. If you're an Arizona fan, what did I get right and wrong? What player, topic, team, or situation should I cover in my next one? And before you go, don't forget to subscribe and check out all my other videos on the end screen, including my video about how Kalen DeBoer rebuilt Washington. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.